Well, hey, my fellow guitar heads. Hope you're well. Now then, topic of the day, Aerosmith, Joe Perry, Brad Whitford, and 5 truly fantastic and early Aerosmith deep cut guitar riffs. Now, I say early deep cut guitar riffs because quite frankly, the more crafted and polished second stage iteration of Aerosmith, the late 80s, 90s, and beyond version of the band, well, was for the most part rather bereft of great guitar riffs. You know, they still kicked ass and they still pumped out some great music, and good for them. They also happened to have a musical renaissance, so to speak, and achieved massive fame as Aerosmith 2.0. However, that sleazy, stripped-down, blues, boogie, guitar-driven sound that initially put them on the rock and roll map had pretty much become a relic of the band's earlier 70s sound. That said, the 70s is where the real meat is found in Aerosmith's back catalog when it comes to the fantastic Joe Perry and Brad Whitford blues-based rock guitar riffs. Now, of course, there are loads of famous riffs from this era. Walk This Way, Draw the Line, Sweet Emotion, Back in the Saddle, Same Old Song and Dance, Toys in the Attic, Last Child, so on and so forth. You know, all of the 70s big rock hits for the most part. However, there lurks within the deep cuts from the band's earlier output some real gems when it comes to kick-ass guitar riffs from the boys from Boston, and these are what we'll be looking at today. My personal top 5 favorite early riffs from some of the lesser known but still awesome Aerosmith tracks. Like I said, the deep cuts, if you will. And with that said, let's check out my first pick. Alright, granted, it's not the deep cuttiest of my picks, as it's a pretty famous early Aerosmith track amongst fans. However, stemming from 1975's Toys in the Attic album, it certainly wasn't a hit single, and it was far outshined by the likes of Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion, and the title track. Plus, it's an early track that has been added to the band's live set list only a handful of times over the years. Now, Adam's Apple was actually written by Steven Tyler and not Perry or Whitford, so I may have to give credit to Steven Tyler for this riff, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I think that Steven Tyler stated in his autobiography that this track was one of the most perfectly written tracks he and the band ever wrote. And I have to agree with that assertion. Great goddamn early Aerosmith track this, and of course, a great goddamn early Aerosmith guitar riff to kick the whole thing off. Good then, let's move on to my second deep cut pick and its fantastic opening riff. Let's check it out. Good then. Combination, sitting at track 4 on the band's masterpiece Rocks from 1976. Combination can definitely be considered one of Aerosmith's finest deep cuts, and in my opinion, one of Joe Perry's greatest overall early guitar riffs. Rocks, of course, was Aerosmith at their absolute 70s peak. It simply didn't get any better than this album. It is so full of classic Aerosmith tracks that it's hard to consider any of them to be deep cuts. But of all of the tracks on this album, I think that Combination is the one that gets the least amount of love. Just a great snaky little fuzzed out opening riff put down by Perry on this one. And it's one of the heavier tracks from the Rocks album as well. Great stuff. Always been one of my favorite early Aerosmith tracks. Regardless, let's move on to my next great deep cut Aerosmith guitar riff, and here it is. Right then, Get It Up, track 4 from 1977's Draw the Line album, and some slick slide work from Mr. Joe Perry put down on this one. Now, any excuse to get my slide out and have a bit of fun with it is reason good enough for me. However, regardless of that, I do love this riff and this track quite a bit. Get It Up was actually released as the 3rd single from Draw the Line, but it didn't make much of an impression with the public, and it failed to enter the charts. Thus, its deep cut designation, I suppose. Add to the fact that throughout the years, it's only been played live by the band a little over 20 times, and the majority of those instances being on that year's Draw the Line tour. I'm giving this track some love today on my list, however, because it's some absolutely fantastic and classic Joe Perry guitar work. And with that said, let's move on. This is my next pick on my list of deep cut Aerosmith guitar riffs. Bone to Bone, Coney Island, Whitefish Boy, whatever the hell that means. Knowing Aerosmith, I'm sure that it's a sexual reference of sorts. This track stems from 1979's somewhat uneven Night in the Ruts album. Now, with Joe Perry quitting the band halfway through its recording, and Tyler so drugged out of his mind that he could barely write lyrics, it was certainly a chore getting this album written, recorded, and released. They, of course, got her done without Perry on board, but thankfully he had put down his guitar parts for 5 or 6 of the tracks before his departure. including Bone to Bone. Though the album received mixed reviews and sales of it were somewhat poor, and despite all the inner band turmoil and drug use, Steve, Joe, and the rest of the guys in Aerosmith have nothing but good things to say about Night in the Ruts when they look back upon it. It's an album that they're quite proud of for the most part. It certainly has its share of great Aerosmith tracks, and my pick, Bone to Bone, Coney Island, Whitefish Boy, is definitely a highlight of that album, with of course a cool and awesome Joe Perry guitar riff to kick the whole thing off. Right then, let's finish up here. Here is my final pick. Right, so we're pretty much progressing chronologically through these riffs, but we're going to go back to Toys in the Attic for this one. No More, No More is easily one of my very favorite early Aerosmith songs, and Steven Tyler himself has stated on occasion that it's one of his very favorite tracks as well. Like Adam's Apple from Toys in the Attic, it's a rather classic Aerosmith track amongst fans. However, it's another track from Toys in the Attic that gets completely overshadowed by that album's many major hits. However, it's rather obvious that No More, No More holds a special place for the guys in Aerosmith, as it's been played hundreds of times over the years live, while, like I said, the aforementioned Adam's Apple has only been played on a handful of occasions. Joe Perry banged this clever riff out in open E5 tuning, wherein all of the strings on the guitar are tuned to either E or B. Very interesting tuning. That said, Perry, of course, was one of those guitarists who constantly messed about with alternate tuning throughout the years. Now, No More, No More is not as hard driving as most of the others here on my list, as it's a bit more of a mid-tempo track, but it's a damn fine opening riff and well worthy of its inclusion here on my list of Aerosmith deep cuts. Well, there you have it. I certainly hope you enjoyed that, and you know, if more than a couple of people watch and like this video, maybe we'll keep this format going, have a look at a couple of other bands in the future, but we'll see about that. Regardless, if you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button, drop me a subscribe if you haven't done that already, as that would be awfully nice. Hit that notification bell, wherever that may be, so you know when I upload something new. Hope you're well out there in your little guitar corner of the world, wherever that may find you, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.